Mississippi. Joining us now in the studio, the Commissioner of the Mississippi Department of Child Protection Services, Andrea Sanders. Good afternoon, Andrea.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me on, Gerard.
Appreciate you joining us today. So wanted to have you in to give us kind of an update. Let's start with legislation that passed or maybe was considered that didn't pass this past session that affects your agency. What's story there?
You know, Gerard, I am in my 6th month as the commissioner.
Yep.
So depending on how you look at it, I've been there a long time or I haven't been there very long at all. The legislature was very good to me this year, but I also didn't ask for a lot.
Okay.
I came into this position November 9th of 2020, and I committed to everyone I talked to at the Capitol that before I made big ask, I would have data and information to support the ask and a very clear idea of what I needed the money for. They gave me a little more than level funding from the previous year, and they also have generously funded a major replacement project for our legacy software system. It's our internal tech stuff, if you will. But it's really the key to improving and modernizing how we deliver services in Mississippi. So I'm very pleased with how my first year went.
All right, so explain to our audience, Andrea, if you will, exactly what the scope of services is that the agency provides. Because you're part of Human Services, or you're a totally separate agency now? How does that work?
Well, now you're digging around in some interesting territory.
There we go.
We were part of Department of Human Services, so, you know, until about 4 years ago, Child Protection Services was a division of the Department of Human Services.
Okay.
Child Protection Services has been in a federal lawsuit over civil rights of children in foster care since 2004 in Mississippi. And as a result of that lawsuit, I think the legislature and the governor at that time recognized that the agency needed more attention than it could really get as a division of another major agency. So we have roughly 1,500 employees, which is about the same number as DHS. We have a footprint across the entire state.
Right.
And so they carved out CPS from DHS. It still has a relationship with DHS that is unique. Statutorily, it's called we are in but not of. So a little unclear exactly what that means, but it allows us to share certain services. And we are, Bob Anderson and I, who is the director there now, are actually engaging in a voluntary internal audit, if you will, just to objectively look at which services make sense to share.
Okay. So then more specifically then, what do you focus on? What does CPS focus on from a service perspective?
You know, I've told everyone since I've been there, it's clear to me that the mission of this agency is very, very simple. We protect children, and that's it. Sounds, you know, it's a lot more complex than that, obviously, and we do it in a variety of different ways. One of the ways that we protect children, I guess the classic way that we protect children is that when we know about abuse or we have reports of abuse, we investigate those.
Okay.
And we might have to go so far as to remove children from the home to protect them. However, a bigger part of our work that goes unnoticed and sometimes misunderstood is that we try to prevent removal of children from families if at all possible.
Sure.
Because we know now, and there's plenty of evidence to support, that removing a child from their family is extremely traumatic. It is quite clearly an adverse childhood experience that often rivals the adverse experience they're experiencing at home.
Yeah.
So if we can intervene with services in the household and keep the family intact, it's better for the child in the long run. So there's it's a judgment call at that point in time.
And so the workers for the agency in the field, these are social workers, a lot of them are, that interact directly with the families and are involved in these situations?
Yes. Fortunately, they don't have to make that decision alone. They have to statutorily work through the youth court. And we do work very closely with the court and a multidisciplinary team in most counties. That might include law enforcement. It might include advocates from the Child Advocacy Center. It should include a guardian ad litem for the child. So there's a team of people who make decisions about custodial arrangements for children.
Okay.
But we are certainly a vital part of that.
What about foster children? Is that through your agency? Is that handled through your group? Yeah.
Yes. And this is May. We're approaching May, which is Foster Care Month. The focus of foster care is also one of those things that I think sometimes goes misunderstood. The role of foster parents, and we've not been very successful with changing the nomenclature in Mississippi, but they're often called resource families now. And the theory is that they would share parenting with biological parents if at all appropriate. When we go back to that decision of whether to take a child out of their home and traumatize them further, sometimes the equation says yes, that, the risk at home is too great, so we have to remove them. The best thing for them is to have a stable foster family that fills the role of supporting the biological family, and often there can be very effective teaching and coaching that goes on in that arrangement. It doesn't always work out perfectly.
How many foster children do we have now in Mississippi?
We have roughly 3,750, which is substantially decreased from about 3 years ago. We have made a big effort to move children towards permanency through the legal process, and also to reunite more children with their families. And then, of course, we've all been in this crazy situation this past year in a pandemic.
Yeah.
Our reporting numbers have been down substantially, but logically we know that children they haven't been in schools, they haven't been in their pediatricians' offices on a regular basis. So, those of us who've done this work for a long time fear that really means that just, nobody's had eyes on them.
What's the ratio of social workers to foster children?
Well, there's a little bit of variation based on the type of work that they do, but roughly we try to keep one social worker to around 14 to 17 children. And then we keep one supervisor who is a licensed master's level social worker or equivalent degree. We have one of those for every 5 workers. So we intentionally try to build in a very robust structure for for efficacy in this whole process. Now, recruiting and keeping qualified social workers in these roles has been a challenge.
Yeah. What's your vision for the agency?
I talked with a group of workers up in Madison County yesterday, supervisors, and one of my visions is that this would be the premier place in Mississippi if you're interested in social work or you're interested in impacting children and families. This will be the place that you want to go work to do that you want to go for the training and the experience. But overall, my vision is that we would decrease incidents of abuse for children in Mississippi. Yeah. And I think that it's possible to move the needle on that.
Yeah. So I should share that my wife and I are foster parents and had 2 foster children. It's been 15 years.
Wow.
But both of the boys or brothers abruptly lost their single mother and had no other family. Mm-hmm. And but they're both very productive adults, and one's getting married here pretty soon. So
that is amazing.
The other's already a father, and very productive. But I would just want to pass on that our experience in working with a social worker was fantastic. And I wanted to pass it on. I'm sorry I can't remember her name, but and the reason I ask about the ratio is that I know at that time, and she certainly wasn't complaining, but they were overloaded.
Yes.
There was very few social workers for a lot of kids. I want to say like she had 75 or something.
You're probably not off base on that, Gerard. I worked at DHS briefly in the early 90s when I came back from my graduate program in social work. And I left as quickly as I could get there. I was at the state office, but Yes, so we are doing far better than we've done in the past. A lot of progress has been made in Mississippi. I still think there's a lot to be made.
Gotcha. My wife just texted, said it was Miss Jackson, and yes, she said she had 75 kids. I'm not sure.
What county?
Madison. So our experience was fantastic. But nonetheless, I also want to point out, and we got to go, but I only pointed out that the folks that do this, they don't do it for the money.
No.
And they truly are committed to it. They care about these kids. They care about these